fantasy or a fiction. They live in tradition. And that is the big difference. And that's why we see some of the problems, is because liberalism has gone to the extreme. Now, most people will tell me that, like, I'm either a brown noser to Trump or I'm a brown noser to Biden and stuff like that. I kind of get the same stigma that Bill O'Reilly does, but I don't follow. I'm not aligned with any political party, and so, but I see the benefits and the flaws in each side. But the thing is if I were to be classified as anything, I think I would. Thomas Paine is who influenced me the most. He is what kind of helped me wrap my mind around the American idea, because without his writing of common sense, America wouldn't be what America was. Because of that writing, that turned the tide of the war. He became a revolutionary because in 1803 he went and did the same thing when he wrote Age of Reason and attacked the Christians in the Catholic Church, because he was a deist. And that's the reason why we don't know about him, is because over time the Christians have, in their own way, whitewashed history. And this is the right that's doing this, because that's where, well, no, this is the no, I wouldn't, because no, the Democrats used to be conservative. So yeah, well, we'll just say conservative side. This is what the conservative side did, because they're Christians, and anything non-Christian or challenges Christianity, we need to wipe out. So therefore, we don't know how integral, how important Thomas Paine was. Thomas, they were okay. We had the Articles of Confederation, which was Thomas Paine's idea through his Common Sense book. Okay, yes, Thomas Paine is my favorite. Okay, so he writes this, and so therefore we get the Articles of Confederation, because government is there to serve the people. The people are not there to serve the government. The government is supposed to be a functional body that makes our life easier and allows us to go in the right direction without hindrance. And the government's duty and responsibility is to protect our freedoms while also protecting property and person. Okay, and so that's really where it was. But the thing is the federal government had no power, the state government had no power. All the power was vested in the community, in the counties. Okay, but there was no centralized what do you call it, a centralized bank or money system or stuff like that. So all they were supposed to do is go to Philadelphia, in what we now know as the was it the Constitutional Hall. And they knew that they were committing treason. They knew that they were doing something that they weren't supposed to, but yet they did it anyways, and they did it in secrecy. And yet that sets precedence for everything that's happened. So when we look at our politicians, we say, oh, our founding fathers. Well, no, they were just as deceptive. Okay, but here's the thing: they were monarchists. They wanted to reestablish an American sovereignty that was a nationalist government that was ruled under divine right. While Thomas Paine was not part of that. So the monarchists took the name of being federalists, and the Federalists had to take the name of being anti-Federalist, but it was nothing more than a wordplay. So everything that's happening where the government has been nationalized, this is exactly what our founding fathers wanted. And if it wasn't, the Constitution was originally being passed without the Bill of Rights. Now go read the Constitution, but exit the Bill of Rights, and that's what we were originally going to get. And Thomas Paine, through the Anti-Federalist Papers, was able to bring it to a halt to the New York convention. At the New York convention, they finally gotten enough headwind of people asking questions to where they're like, okay, let's take a moment here. And so New York decided to, because of the argument, decided to conditionally accept and ratify the Constitution, because they were the final state. But the condition was that they had to add the Bill of Rights. And so it took 2 years to write the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. And we would not even have any rights, nor the government would think that we have any rights. So if we want to sit there and look at, Ben Franklin and all the rest of them as these great people, well, hold on a second. What about Thomas Paine? Without Thomas Paine, we wouldn't have America. Without Thomas Paine, we wouldn't have the Bill of Rights. And at this day and age, that Bill of Rights is so important, because the government is continuously trying to use your ignorance to infringe on those rights. Okay, so land and trailer. Thanks, Blake. Um, Hey, what's going on, Blake? Sorry about that, guys. I just kind of got on a rant. Okay, me too. Okay. Okay. So I'm better. I'm going overwhelmed. Black. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Thomas Paine, Tuck has posted a lot of new stuff recently. What's up, Adam? Nice to see you, buddy. I ain't seen you in a long time. Australia has no federal Bill of Rights, just random trivia. Well, yeah, that's kind of what separates us from the rest of the world, is that um, we had some intelligent people that were able to see cause and effect and see what was really going on. Okay, so the thing is even George Washington, we had to win that war. We won our political freedom, but we did not win our financial freedom. And it works out this way: your political freedom is like having possession. It is you've got possession. But what is the other 10%? The other 10% is title, or in this sense, economic freedom. Because of the debt that we owed to be able to earn our political freedom, we re-enslaved ourselves. And that is why Alexander Hamilton was so detrimental, and why we've had 3 central banks. And I hope that Trump abolishes this one, but that would mean that he would have to pay off the national debt, just like Andrew Jackson. But he would also have to have a constitutional provision to not privatize the government as far as its financial survival, because that puts the country too vulnerable. You're giving title away in a lot of ways. So we are what you described, Constitution without Bill of Rights. Yes. Um, so, but I mean, this is extremely important. Let me make a cup of coffee, guys. You guys got me on a rant. I haven't even gotten to. Are you guys type 1 if you're enjoying this? Type 2 if you just want me to continue on to a different subject. Let's see here. I want me some coffee. Yeah, that. Yeah, that little talk just kind of spiked my adrenaline. That's why I kind of sound as calm as I do. It's because of my adrenaline. I don't want to spike it, because when I spike it, I start shaking. I get anxious. I chain smoke. Um, Pretty much, it's just nothing but a cloud of smoke going in my lungs. My name is Chapu today. Um, so yeah, I guess you guys are just listening. Okay. Well, where is my have me another cup of coffee. One. Okay, what's up, Henry? All right, so you like that? Okay, yeah, because that's the thing about being about homesteaders and the off grid and the preppers, like this type of stuff that you guys hear from me. I think that in an indirect way, I think I will end up fitting into this community a lot better than I fit into the homeless community, because you know the oh, like I said, homelessness is a state of mind. It is not anything else. And so, I mean, this is just um it's just another way for me to keep my mind occupied and do what I need to do. I don't know. I'll have to figure out a way to really like articulate it and define it, but I don't know. But so here's something interesting, since you guys like this talk. So perhaps maybe a long plan of playing it off and doing the central bank thing you said. Um, they already want to use 20% of recovered dollars to start paying down. Well, no, they need. So How did Andrew Jackson do it? Okay, so Andrew Jackson was a communist. Okay, and just so that you guys understand, because right now my Professor Tuck hat is on. Okay, so Professor Tuck is going to tell you that communism is not Marxism. Just like you have different brands of cars, you have different brands of communism. Marxism was nothing more than the elite's version of communism that fit them, and they used a whiny rich boy to put it into play, because he's always going to look for self-preservation of the wealth. Okay, and that happened, what was it, 1856? Okay, so so communism is actually an idea of Christianity. That's what most people don't realize. It is actually a Christian idea. It is not some new age, utopian. This is the Christian utopia, is communism. That's what Jamestown was. Okay. And Thanksgiving is a memorialization of the defeat of communism because of how Jamestown happened, if you go listen to the real story. Okay. But at that point in time, communalists or communists believed in the small community and the small community governing itself, i.e., essentially what the Articles of Confederation were. That's what original communalism or communism was. And now, but the thing is that they had rules and regulations, okay, and bylaws, but it would have been like a modern day HOA, okay. So for those of you that are in HOAs, you know what I'm talking about. That is original communism, okay. And so if you want to participate in that, you get to participate in that, okay. So the communists back then believed that the money belonged to the people. It does not belong to a central bank. It does not belong to a third party. It belongs to the people, because this is how we support ourselves through the avenues of commerce in the public marketplace. This is how you get your food. This is how you get your luxury items. This is how you get the things that you want. Is without commerce, and the ability to have currency, the ability to be able to have the luxuries in life are diminished through barter system, because it's whether or not what you have is valuable to that person or not. Okay. And so he believed that the money belonged to the people. So therefore, he pushed Congress to, in his first term, he pushed Congress um, not to renew the charter, because its 20-year charter was coming up in 1832. Well, he ends up, they end up, well, in the same way that Trump is finding all this corruption, Andrew Jackson found all this corruption in a similar way, through the back room, seeing that Congress was going to do it because they were too busy being paid off by the bankers. And so, if you go in the New York Times editorial section, you'll see where Andrew Jackson and the bankers are going back and forth. And the banker said, "You know what? We'll get you. We're gonna get you." And he had to go to the small business owners and say, "Look, man, I need you to stay with me. This is a fight for our freedom." And being an American and still being part, or having remnants of the Revolutionary War in that generation, in the same way we still, those that are Gen Xers really understand the significance of the World War II generation. It was that type of nostalgia. So therefore, he was able to get the small business owners behind him, and that was the only way he was able to win re-election. And so once he won re-election, towards the end of his term, his second term, was when the charter was going to come up, and he refused to do it. And because Congress was going to renew it, what he decided to do, was his only way to circumvent it, was to remove all of the gold from the central bank. And in order to do that, he had to pay off the American national debt. So he paid off that debt. And because of that, because we were no longer a debtor nation, that's why we became one of the largest creditors, and what set us up for being the powerhouse that we are, is because Andrew Jackson understood that the money belonged to the people, not central bankers. When you give central bankers the ability to control your money supply, they care not who makes your laws. I think Nelson Rockefeller said that, or no, it wasn't Rockefeller. It was who was the guy that took over? Rothschild, who said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws." Okay, so this is a slow progression. This is why this happened. Now, let's fast forward to the Civil War. Now, this is speculation on my part, just because I'm looking at cause and effect. Oh, you're very late. You're so late, man. But don't worry, you can catch up. You can watch it. Hey, and if you guys have the free membership over on Patreon, that's where the replays will start being moved after the live stream. Okay. So we have that, but the bankers vowed vengeance. Okay. And because they vowed vengeance, you know, they are a family of bankers, and so therefore they could pass it down from generation to generation of, the feud, because the bankers got one upped by Andrew Jackson and they didn't like it. And so what they ended up doing was, uh, uh, helping start a trade war between the North and the South. See, the South was operating on free trade, and they really weren't making a lot of money because of free trade. But the North wanted to do tariffs, and so therefore it made the cost of, they could get the materials cheap from the South, but then when they wanted to do the dyes and stuff like that, they still had to pay a tariff to be able to import that in, and so on and so forth. And this is how the North protected its industry, because that's the purpose of tariffs. Tariffs are to protect the local. They say, oh well, it hurts the local. Well, yeah, if you're dependent on cheap, yeah, and if it's if you're going to treat that like heroin, great. But it's the you need to protect your industry from malicious competitors, and so that's why the North did that. Well, in this whole thing, a trade war was created between the North and the South. um, and slavery was just a final thing. But there was a lot of grievances that came there, and this was all instituted by the banks. Okay, and so the and so when Abraham Lincoln was trying to fund the Civil War, he realized that, well, he was reminded by his Secretary of Treasury that the federal government has the right to create its own currency, and so they created the greenbacks to kind of go back to complement the gold, because the government could print its own money, and then it would just be the full faith and credit. Well, afterwards, the government refused to pay, just like they always do. They are they are just as bad as nonprofits. They will take your money, and then they will refuse to pay you. That is the government. And so the United States declared bankruptcy, which would explain why we had a Reorganization Act in the 1870s, to mimic that. Just in the same way we had a currency change in the 1930s and we reorganized the government. We went from a corporatocracy to a socialist government under FDR, and that's why all those policies weren't being implemented. Is what Donald Trump is doing? Is he doing the same thing? Are we in the process of going bankrupt, and he's managing our bankruptcy to be able to? He may not be able to save us, but he may be able to manage our bankruptcy because he is a businessman and he understands how bankruptcy works, because you have to reorganize a company or a corporation after the bankruptcy to be able to reflect the new status, so it pays off its debts. Okay, because what it is it's a way to screw over your creditors and reduce your monthly payment so that you can stay solvent. Okay. um, but this is kind of like what's going on. So is Donald Trump reorganizing the government? That is a question that most people aren't asking, but they should be asking, because if you follow history, and if you follow the way things have happened in the cause and effect and the cataclysms and so on and so forth, you can see this. Okay, I don't know why people aren't even talking about this, but if you follow constitutional history and you have a basic understanding, well, I guess not a basic understanding. Yeah, I have a mediocre understanding of it just by following history, because you got to pay attention to not only the political history but the legal history, because it's a legal document and it sets the rules of the game. And so, therefore, it's important that you understand how to enforce the rules of the game. That's why I have the collection going on over on Patreon, Contracting in Everyday Life. You're going to learn the rules of the game, and then you're going to learn how to enforce that contract to be able to make it turn out in your best interest. Because there's ways to do it and to still be colorable within law. And that is my problem with the Freeman movement. I mean, I learned a lot from the Freeman movement. They taught me holes in history that I'd always had questions about. But anyways, dang, paid the credit bill in full. Bold move. Yeah, and that's why people, that's why it gets me when they say that we still owe the Revolutionary War debt. No, no, we couldn't have. Okay, so the War of 1812. Okay, so in I guess it would be in 1792 or during George Washington's first presidency. Uh, Alexander Hamilton, who was an agent of the banks, just like Chase was, he was sent there to whisper in the ear of of George Washington, and he convinced George Washington to set up a central bank, because this is how we were going to pay back our creditors for the Revolutionary War debt. And so he did it. But George Washington's farewell, he said, no, That was my biggest regret. In the same way that that Woodrow Wilson said it was his biggest regret. You notice that the presidents do it and they think it's a great idea, and then all of a sudden, as they're leaving, they're like, "Oh man, that was the worst thing I ever did. I wish I would have never done that." George Washington said that, and so did Woodrow Wilson. Okay, because they love their country. They just had a different idea on how it went, and then when they realized that that they sold their country out to a bunch of jackals instead of people that were aligned with their interest, you find out that there is real evil in the world. Mm. But yeah, the War of 1812 was Thomas Jefferson did not want to renew the charter because that was its 20-year thing, and so therefore he refused to renew the charter and then decided he wanted to take over Canada because they were expecting that the British government was going to show up in full force and take over the Americas because we refused to have their debt. But you notice that the treaty afterwards was okay, well, we got to reinstitute another 20-year charter, which then therefore we get Andrew Jackson. Okay. So we've actually had three central banks of the United States: the first, the second, and then the Federal Reserve. But this is how the international order has been trying to gain control of America. Our fight is not with the British government. Our fight is with bankers. So, ding ding ding. What you just said made a connection with the reason contracting is a focus in your suggestions. Ah, okay. Maybe make a short for YouTube out of some of this lesson so that's relevant to today. I will try. I will definitely give it a good old college try. Hmm. Not having flavored creamer kind of sucks. So, USA tied all those threads 200 years ago. Um, okay, Australia still hasn't even made treaties with First Nations populations, so we carry out unknown will be traded in treaty when it finally happens. I don't understand. So you guys are supposed to have your own autonomy in the same way that yeah, Canada saw what we did, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to go that route. And so what they did is they went and made a deal. It's like, okay, we want our own autonomy. We'll still pledge to the crown, but we want our own autonomy to govern ourselves. And that's essentially, honestly, the Americans could have done that, and it would have probably ended up much better for them versus what we got now. Because the British Empire would probably still be the British Empire. It would probably be one of the longest lasting empires, and they would probably have had a one world government 150 years ago. So America, in a lot of ways, stopped it, but said we want to be the world government. Yeah, title that starts 200 years ago. Yes. I see what you're saying. This history lesson. So, I might just leave this one public and retitle it and stuff like that, and see what happens. If people are interested in it, they'll listen. But yeah. Um, I don't know. What should I title it though? If I just leave the live stream up without doing that, um, get a lot of views. Well, yes, views are good. Yes, views are definitely good. It's what I'm shooting for. Um, but what I'd really like to do is not be dependent on views. That's why I talk. I'm sharing my knowledge now out in public of the things that I know and like my authority and stuff like that, because I'm hoping that people will see that I'm an authority in this, and they'll come over to Patreon and they'll go into the shop and they'll pay the $20 to be able to get access to this as I keep adding to it. And you get lifetime access to this. If I decide to change the price, it doesn't affect you. You're not going to it doesn't affect you. So you might as well get in while it's inexpensive, because this is going to be a $100 to $200 course once I really get it down, because I'm going to use my knowledge of history and what I've learned through the free man movement and applying it myself, and how I've been able to make it colorable in the public so that you as an individual can assert as many of your freedoms as you possibly can. Okay, that's really what I'm wanting. That's really, because um, if I've got 10 or 20 people a month coming, then that means that I can build some momentum. Out of that, there's going to be people that are like, I've learned this, but I want somebody to do the process for me. I just posted on Fiverr right now to be able to make custom contracts for people, because I had to use my I found my old janitorial contract that I wrote for uh, for my biggest client. I hand wrote that contract, so you can see it over on Fiverr. But yeah, I tried to upload it to the collection, but it won't let me. Um, but it just I'm not gonna. I can't talk the nuts and bolts because I'm not an attorney. But to write your own contract, you don't need to be an attorney. The only time you want an attorney is when you want an argument. Because if you go look on the bar association in big bold letters, they do not operate in the interest of the client. They do not represent the client. See, the attorney and the judge have two other masters before they get to you, because the according to Lee Brost, the modern day lawyer that we have today came from the Middle Temple of the Crown Bank of England. I don't understand all the that he. I trust his knowledge because of how much of an authority he is. I mean, his work is cited in most white papers when it comes to talking about trust law. So this guy is an authority. He's not just some fly by night crackpot. No, this guy knows his stuff, and he knows it so well that he is a common source for topics such as trust law, so on and so forth. And but anyways, he says that they were created out of the Middle Temple of the Crown Bank of England, and then they created the British Bar Association, and then that came over here to the States. And then once we realized that by becoming a part of the British Bar Association, here in the States, they were pledging their loyalty to England and the Crown Bank of England. Okay, and then from that point, we decided to get rid of it, but they still have their association or their franchise from the crown from the British Bar Association. And that's the reason why you see, Todd Williams Esquire, because Esquire is a title of nobility. So this goes back to the original 13th Amendment before the Civil War, which was no titles. You can't be you cannot be a citizen of the several states and have a title of nobility. So no titles of nobility shall exist within the several states or within the United States at any point in time, because they realized that those people were, and this happened after Thomas Jefferson. This happened before the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, it happened between like 1812 and like 1825. Okay, which, if you want to know what the Monroe Doctrine is, go read the Treaty of Paris. Or no, not the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Verona, 1822. Um, and it will be a real eye opener. It really will. It won't take you but maybe 15 minutes to read, but look at the terms and conditions. Like, once you realize what a contract is and kind of how to read a contract and interpret it, look at the terms and conditions, because we have to pay 2 million in gold to the monarchs to tell them to walk away. So we got bent over and royally screwed because of that's why the monarchy is still available, is because of the Monroe Doctrine. Okay. Treaty of Verona, 1822. Yes. No, it's the Treaty of Verona. So the city in which it was signed in, and then the year. That's how you search things. So Treaty of Paris, 1783, is the end of the American Revolution. Treaty of Verona, 1822, is the written Monroe Doctrine. But yeah, that's essentially, like, if you're gonna go look it up. But you got to realize that the United States is under treaties that are all the way back to the BC. In order to be able to be part of the the community of nations, you have to agree to a certain set of rules. And so all nations have to take these treaties, whether they're new or old. Britain is under the same treaties that we are. And when the United now any new treaties that we enter into, and then we start walking away from these treaties and stuff like that, but there's a certain set of rules that everybody abides by. Like, the nuclear proliferation stuff that we were doing, that was supposed to be for the next generation of states, to make sure that we got rid of nuclear weapons and we did not allow it to be something that completely destroys our planet. Okay, but again, we're walking away from these treaties because of politics and whatever else. Mm. Doc, you're speaking Latin to my backwards, but with these legal terms. Well, that's why. Well, yeah, that's why the next video that I'm posting on there is going to be legal terms, legal. It's it's terms, definitions, and maxims, because those are the three things that you really need to understand. Fiverr is an app for freelancers. Yes, it is. And so is Upwork. Okay, my document from Queen Crown. Miners' right condition. The Crown will fully give land to public use without keeping a backdoor to reclaim loophole. Well, because it's collateral. That's why. Um, in the modern age, okay, I gotta sit my leg. I'm losing circulation in my leg. Okay, let's see if we can do it this way. Okay. Okay. Um, okay, so here's the thing. Here in the States, they have something called communal property. You guys hear me talk about, I want my land to be a black dot on the map, but most of you guys don't even understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so as the United States has declared bankruptcy, it's had to add more collateral until it got to the point where its last thing to collateralize is its people, and so that's what happened in the 1930s. Okay, but as part of that happened, because they've collateralized everything from the land to the resource to everything, because that is how we're able to go out and borrow. Well, with that being said, they made laws saying communal property, and what communal property is, and you can go look in. You can go look in any state that you're in, and you can find this. So if you get electricity, water, septic, garbage, any public services, any public resources on your land, if you connect your land to it, it now becomes communal property. You no longer own the land. You only own the structures on the land. But that land now belongs to the government in communal property. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. This is why I say I want it to be a black dot on the map, because a black dot on the map means that it's not communal property. It's not within their jurisdiction. Okay. Platypus, you might understand this a little bit more. But if you're really curious to see it, go look at the city planners map. See how many black dots are on there. And then go by and look at those black dots. And they are private everything. If deemed necessary for the country. Yes, because communal. It's because they've written the laws in such a way, and because people don't want to inform themselves, they don't want to. And it's been written many times in history, where you'll hear somebody say, after a vote was done in Congress, if the people knew what we'd done here today, DC would be raised by morning, because they were actually afraid of us, knowing that if they screwed us, because we were keeping a close eye on them. And then all of a sudden we got fat and happy, and then we got desperate and materialistic, and therefore we sold our birthright for what? A bowl of porridge? But you do have the right to reclaim your birthright. There, one thing that most people don't realize is that for every in, there has to be an out, because you cannot have compulsory performance. You cannot compel someone to perform unless by judicial order or act of Congress. And then at that point in time, that can be challenged through a judicial order. Okay, so for if they're going to give you the choice to be a United States citizen, they also have to give you a choice to rescind that. Okay, and so that's what the Expatriation Act is. So the vote before the 14th Amendment was passed was the Expatriation Act, because they had to create the loophole before they created the binding. Okay, and the same thing goes with taxes. Okay, as people, I was watching something. Oh, taxes are voluntary. Taxes are voluntary. Yes, they are very voluntary. But here's the $1 million answer. Okay, the reason why you pay taxes here in the United States has nothing to do with the 16th Amendment. It was a 1 year excise tax. Okay, and it added just that. And I don't understand why they did that as an amendment versus just using the power to lay and collect tax. Okay, I don't understand it, but they did. Okay, but the in the U.S. when the United States incorporated in the 1870s, all of its assets became subsidiaries. Okay, and so therefore in the 1930s they went out there and they're using that as collateral. So not necessarily using you as collateral. What they did is, because they cannot have any citizens, because that's not what it was meant for. The citizens were meant to be in the several states, not in the United States. Okay, um, you were meant to be a citizen of your state. And so therefore they had, because it's basically a holding trust, they had to turn the people and mark them as deceased and put them as corpuses or corporations, and therefore later on they would collateralize that. And so therefore you have the right to not only to do that, to be able to go in there and take control of that, but do you want to? Because once you take it away from the federal government, you can't use it in the public. Okay. um, but it's just the reason why you pay taxes is because as a U.S. citizen, you are a carrier of commerce. The Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, amended in 1940, labeled you as a carrier of commerce. The IRS didn't come around until the 1950s because they had to lay the legislative groundwork to be able to put that there. So, because you are a carrier of commerce and you are governed under interstate commerce, because you are domiciled in the District of Columbia, traveling abroad in one of the many territorial states of the United States, because in the 1830s they did a federal overlay that mimicked the state boundaries. Go look at the Constitution for your state in 1855. Unless you're in Oregon, go look at it in 1859, the first Constitution. Okay, any Constitution written before 1860 for the state. They have to rewrite the Constitution or make amendments to it every time something changes. That includes the boundaries, because any plot of land, this plot of land that I'm on right now, has metes and bounds. It gives the exact dimensions and the exact borders of where it is, and it has to be enshrined in writing. Well, since at least the 1920s, if you go look on any state constitution, there's no metes and bounds. Go look at your state constitution today and look at it pre-Civil War, and then ask yourself the question, why do we not have metes and bounds? This is because in the 1830s, they did a federal overlay. The federal overlay or territorial overlay does not have any metes and bounds. It's just like open territory. We're claiming this as ours, and we're going to staunchly defend it until we can turn it into one of the states. So, IRS. It's the IRS. But anyways, maybe in martial law. Okay, hold on. Let's see. My hobo internet. Okay. Preppers seem to think the state can commandeer their food storages, etc., if required for public use legally. Well, yes, because you're a U.S. citizen. Okay. As a U.S. citizen, there are white papers that are written government employee. That's how statutory laws are able to be applied. This employee handbook. This is the rules and regulations for working within our company, and so that's why they are the way they are. And the company is always going to write its policies in its favor. So whenever it needs something, it's just going to come take it from you. Okay, because you voluntarily uh uh, 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 so 13th Amendment, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. So you entered into what's called voluntary servitude by applying or petitioning to become a U.S. citizen. And by doing that, you waived your rights of citizenship in the state to become a second class citizen in the United States. And so, as a second class citizen, because you have benefits and privileges, not rights, the Supreme Court continuously rules and says that the Bill of Rights was designed to protect the citizens of the states from the federal government, not U.S. citizens from the federal government, because a U.S. citizen is a federal citizen. Okay, that's why they're talking about federal IDs and nationalized IDs, because then they can truly abolish the states and make it the nationalist government that Thomas Jefferson and all of them originally wanted. Okay, so um, this is a long plan that these guys had, and we look at these guys as like the greatest people. No, Thomas Paine is the founding father. He is the one that tried to warn us of what was coming, and instead we let a bunch of monarchists, parade around as wolves in sheep's clothing, and now we idolize them as if they were the greatest people in the world, and they weren't. They took they they conspired with the crown to resubjugate us. Is really what it was. Because the whole thing was is that you had the rich people that were pissed off, and the poor people were starting to get affected by it, which is why the rich people were able to incite the poor people. But the Revolutionary War was more for the rich than it was for the poor. Um, Dang, that's a good point. The word is revenue. Okay. Australia pays taxation to the crown. USA has revenue collection from citizens. Well, IRS, but close enough. Yes. Um. Yeah. The um. Again, the IRS was created in 1950. There is a book if you want to read it called "Fruit from a Poisonous Tree." It's a guy that goes on a complete tax rant, and there in chapter 2, there's only one paragraph in there that actually mattered to me. I was so pissed off for reading that whole book, and all I got was one paragraph that gave me an answer that I was hoping to be a lot more detailed, which is that you are sold out on the international market, so your birth certificate is bonded, and that's how they get the money. But he says that in like one of the in chapter 2, and just in one paragraph, and it pissed me off. But his whole rant was about taxation, and what his conclusion and what his research brought him to is it is a private trust with foreign it's a foreign trust uh, domiciled in Puerto Rico. This is why Puerto Rico will never become a state, because if Puerto Rico becomes a state, the IRS has to be abolished, or they have to move it to a different territory, because it has to be governed under territorial law, not under which is under federal jurisdiction, not state law. And if they become a state, do a constitution, even if they don't do the meets and bounds, they still have the federal overlay. They still have some states' rights. Okay, because they got to keep this illusion going somehow, some way. Are you comfortable? So, but yeah, I mean, this is the. I could talk about this endlessly forever because I've spent so much of my time. This is where my true passion is. This is like if and just by happenstance, I got a chance to kind of fall into it, and I'm so glad that. I mean, this is what's making the pivot worth it. Is that I know like now I get to talk about the stuff that like yes, what's going on with the homeless is important. It needs to be changed. There's a lot of stuff, but this my grandfather made sure I understood the difference between a democracy and a republic. He made sure I understood what the Constitution was and why it was so important. He was a World War II vet, and that was extremely important to him. Um, and he even was skeptical about the Kennedy assassination, because he always asked the question. He's like, why is the presidential Bible with LBJ? Why wasn't it with the president? Why did he have it to all? Because it's with the president. I don't think that it's an actual Bible, but I may be wrong. And I think that might have been a loophole that they were doing. But who knows? So we have territories deny state rights to also, they don't get many government reps, own budgets, nothing. I don't know if y'all can see it, but my comment got stuff shuffled in the timeline. Oh, that's fine. It's making it there. Um, yeah, looks like platypus. So this looks like this is right up there. All right, guys, I have been going at this for over an hour, which I was not planning on, but you guys got me on a good topic. If you guys get me on stuff like this, I'll talk forever because this is important. Um, it it's got to be driven home. If we for those of you that are like, okay, what can I do? Like, do I go and I fight the government? No, fighting the government's the dumbest thing that you could do. Okay, but what can you do? You can talk to your federal representatives. You can sit there and say, hey, look, I'd like you to do some research because I heard this and I want to know if this is true. And I really want an in-depth learning on this because it is said that Congress declared war against the rebels, but they never declared peace. So we are still in a form of martial law called martial rule. If we can move Congress to declare peace against the rebels and into the hostilities, that will take the federal government's power away from it, because the only way it could keep this power is by being in a constant state of war. Then that would mean that a lot of the power would return to the states. Okay, because everything we've gone back to normal. That means we can right the ship and get it going properly and move it back towards its constitutional foundation. Okay, the basic rule of law by giving you citizenship in your state versus citizenship in the United States, by restoring your rights, your birthright that your ancestors fought for to be able to have this, and that your ancestors had contributed to be able to have this. Okay, so going to getting hostile with the federal government is not going to be fruitful with you at all. This is why the freemen end up getting shut down every time, is because they become hostile towards the government. You cannot be hostile towards the government unless you want to end up in a very, very bad place. What's up, Kiku? So that's one thing that you can do. But the other thing well, no, honestly, once you do that, then the states can reclaim their sovereignty. So you may even want to go to your local representative in your state, because it will probably have to start there, because they're going to have to be the ones that are going to have to reclaim their sovereignty. And with this whole thing behind about, oh yeah, we want to be all constitutionally right, and oh yes, we're here to save the Constitution. Okay, if we're here to save the Constitution, this is the one thing that you can do that will actually do the most productive thing that you could do, because it's going to return the power back to the people. Okay, because while we're in a continuous state of war, the federal government has ultimate authority, especially under the Constitution, because um, it is essentially the commanding general for all of the armies of all of the states, to act as one full force to protect the the country from enemies, foreign and domestic. And that was one of the few wars that we have had as a nation, or probably the last war that was that had the Constitution, that had the constitutional authority to wage war in defense of the several states and the United States, to protect its borders from enemies, foreign and domestic. And to destroy the Union would be, by the federal government, be considered a domestic enemy. Okay, because their whole job is to preserve the Union. That's the reason why Abraham Lincoln said what he did, to preserve the Union. Well, after he was assassinated, you had people. We have a lot of Johnsons in our presidential lineage that are very corrupt. LBJ and then President Johnson, because a lot of people, and I'll finish off with this. A lot of people think that are sit there and ask, well, what about reparations for the blacks and the slaves and stuff like that? And I hear a lot of people, I'll hear on the right where they go, and they laugh at them. And then on the right, they're like, yeah, they deserve reparations. Let's give them a bunch of money. No, 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 no. Post Civil War, reparations were given. It's called the Sherman Act. And the thing is, as soon as President Johnson took over after the assassination of Lincoln, he said, "We're no," because he was a Southerner. He sympathized with the South. He immediately halted any fulfillment of the Sherman Act. If we are to give the reparations, what it would be is that we need to honor the Sherman Act, because it wasn't properly honored. We would have a much wealthier black population who was a representative for the South, because the top two vote getters were your president. You didn't get to choose your vice president, so on and so forth. But this is the if you want to talk reparations, do they have a case? Yes. But is it money? No, it's not money. They are owed land, and then they are owed the royalties on that land. okay, because they were guaranteed something under the Sherman Act as part of their assistance. If it wasn't for the slaves joining the North and joining the Union to assist them for their own freedom, the North would have never won. The South would have won. That was the game changer between this in the Civil War, was the introduction of the black soldier. Okay, so um, they are entitled and they are owed those rights, but they're only owed what is given to them under the Sherman Act, and then they have to figure out how to enforce it from there. So, do you need the government to do a full-on act to be able to do it? No. No, no, no. It's already an act of Congress. All you got to do is sue Congress and say, here's the Sherman Act. You guys didn't fulfill it. I now expect you to fulfill it and give me my birthright. And if you do something like that, well, then it's colorable, and there's nothing anybody can say about it because it was something that we agreed to after the Civil War, or actually before the Civil War was even over, while it was raging on. So, anyways, guys, thanks for being here. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next live stream.